Fort Kobbe. The first military installation at what became Fort Kobbe was a small defensive position established in 1918, a coastal defense type position. Bruja Point Military Reservation was set apart by Executive Order number 4947 on August 11th, 1928. It was made a permanent military post designated Fort Bruja and incorporated as a subpost to Fort Amador on February 2nd, 1929. Fort Bruja was redesignated as Fort Kobbe on April 15th, 1932. In 1937, the necessity for additional airfield in the Canal Zone arose, and the most suitable site was in the Venado River Valley, which was a part of Fort Kobbe. An airstrip that was known as Bruja Point Air Base was built and later redesignated as Howard Field. Howard Field comprised the greater part of the land on which Fort Kobbe Reservation existed. In August 1946, Howard Field and Fort Kobbe were separated. Fort Kobbe was turned over to the Republic of Panama in 1999. Our location that we have in Fort Kobbe was reported by Paul Harmon. And Paul made a note that he had received an email from a paratrooper at Kobbe that Agent Orange barrels were stored under the mess hall. Now, this may sound strange to some people, but understand that the barracks design used throughout the most of the Canal Zone, the barracks were the base floor was lifted up off the ground, so you had like a crawl space underneath. Now, Paul did not specify the specific barracks. I went and researched, and if I pull out a little bit, what I found was that most of the barracks were recently torn down, and there used to be a row of them here and headquarters buildings down here. I also found that much earlier, a housing area that used to be up in this area was also demolished. Fort Kobbe now has had quite a bit of development down along the coast. There was always a beach that was used, but there's been a lot of development down there. And as I go through these attachments, I'll show you why that's important. This is the 1969 low resolution view, and the row of barracks are located right here. If we go to our Canal Zone map fragment, the line of barracks is located right along here. Now, the other thing I want to show you on this map is that there are two areas that are marked as underground ammunition buildings. Okay, here and here. And if I go back to my 1969 view, that appears to be roughly this area and this area here. But when we go back to the current, you're going to see that, at least for this one, it has been had a lot of development and so forth because of this beach area down here. That's our map. Okay, now this is, the date is unknown on this, but this was a map that was done for the, I believe it was the Directorate of Engineering Housing. And the barracks that we're talking about were up in this area here. Okay, the areas with the underground ammunition bunkers may be these areas that are encircled here, and you see in here. This is a photo I found out on the internet. It did not have a date. It did not have who took it. But these are the barracks on Fort Kobbe. And as you can see, if you look closely, they are elevated above the ground, as most of the barracks in the Canal Zone were. So back on our current view, as I said, I cannot pick out where those ammo areas may have been, nor did anyone report those. What was reported was the barracks area here. Okay, moving on to Howard Air Force Base. As we just talked about, the area that Howard Air Force Base was located on originally was part of the Point Bruja military reservation. And in 1938, they built a strip, an airfield out there, which would have been under the Army Air Corps. And it was subsequently turned over to the Air Force. And it was a jungled area, and it was pretty much, jungle was taken down and so forth in order to open Howard as an Air Force base in 1942. And January 1st, 1950, the base was inactivated and the land was turned back over to the Army. However, the Air Force continued to use Howard as a deployment site for joint training exercises during the 50s. And December of 1961, all Air Force flying operations in Panama were relocated to Howard. On October 1st, 1963, the Air Force reclaimed Howard from the Army, and the base ended up playing a central role in U.S. military operations in Latin America. And that was largely due to the fact that it had an 8,500-foot runway. The base was turned over to the Republic of Panama on November 1st, 1999. It is now been reopened as an international airport, and that occurred in 2014. First point we'll look at on the Howard Air Force Base, the former Howard Air Force Base, is out here along the runway. And this was reported by several people. It was reported by David Searle, John Klang, and Don Ruckel. And they had a few notes here. David Searle said, you know, anywhere along a 20 to 40 yard stretch anywhere along the runway. And he used to be soaked, he said, at the end of the day on the flight line. As I noted, this is an operational airfield at this time. If we look at our attachments, our 1969 low resolution view, our pinpoint is up here. And this is a 1970 photograph that I found it was actually a Wikipedia article about Howard Air Force Base. Our pin spot is up in this area here. And another interesting thing about this photograph is that it shows what was probably the first runway when it was Howard Field under the Army. And of course, this was the runway being used in 1970. Next spot on Howard Air Force Base was reported by Frederick Firehammer. And it's the former helicopter pad area. And Frederick made a comment. He said, "This is where I believe I was exposed when I crawled on my stomach through muddy ground when conducting security flight line penetration exercises to test the security forces' awareness and readiness." Again, as I mentioned, the airport is still operational. If we look at our 1969 low resolution view, the area we're talking about is up in here. And on a Canal Zone map fragment from that time, we're talking about this area in here. And again, the 1970 photograph from Wikipedia, the pad is here and the area, the ground area extending out from it. And another area on Howard, and this was reported by Don Ruckel, and this was the jet engine test cell area. And Don just made a comment that it was off the flight line. And if I pull out, you can see more about it here. I'll show you the attachments for this. On our low resolution 1969 view, we're talking this area down here. On the Canal Zone map fragment, we're down in this area. And again, the 1970 photograph from Wikipedia, we're now in this area here. Now, before I leave Fort Howard, I also wanted to mention one other point, and that is that there were 3 C-123 airplanes that were brought over to the Canal Zone from Vietnam, and they were based at Fort Howard. And these planes had been used in Vietnam to spray Agent Orange, and they were put into service in the Canal Zone to spray to use for insecticide spraying. However, the aircraft had never had the tanks cleaned out after they were used in Panama. So there's a high probability that the tanks and the sprayer mechanisms on those 3 planes were contaminated with Agent Orange from Vietnam. Venado Drop Zone. This also is on land that formerly made up Fort Bruja, and also Fort Kobbe before it was Howard was carved out and so forth. And if we look at the drop zone area, and I'm going to pull out some here. Okay, the Howard runway, Howard Air Force Base runway is over here, and Fort Kobbe is over here. Now this area in here is the former drop zone, and it extended all the way down to the coast. Now it appears that there's a thin line of new development that has appeared right along the coastline, probably to take advantage of the beach area and so forth. If we, before we go here, there were a number of people that reported this. Brian Shee, Paul Harmon, Martin Vaughn, and Jeff Campbell. And most of them gave notes on the location, which was not hard to find. Brian said, well, it's near Fort Kobbe, which is right over here. And Paul Harmon said there was an old World War II emergency landing zone, and the whole area was brown and dead. Martin Vaughn said near Veracruz, which is right here. So let's look at the attachments. Okay, in our low resolution 1969 view, it's pretty easy to pick out. It's this area right here. And as I mentioned, there was no development down here. At that point, it was open to the water. And I've got a couple of photographs that were taken by Bill Lyle, and they were taken in the 1970s. And here you can see someone dropping, and you can't, the drop zone is down here. He's coming down to that. But you can see the end of the Howard Air Force Base runway right here. All right, and this is a second photograph also taken by Bill in the 70s. And this is what, 3 people here coming down into the drop zone. You can clearly see there's no development along the coast. I did find an old discussion board out there, people who had dropped into this zone, and you know, one of them was talking about the fact that whoever was the first person in the stick out the door had to work hard not to end up in the Pacific, which is, of course, this water right here. And one of them also mentioned, yeah, that was their experience too, but when they had drops, they usually had someone out here with boats who could get to them pretty quickly to pull them out. And someone else replied, yeah, they knew about the boats and so forth, but they couldn't get out of that water quick enough because this whole area, he said, was infested with sharks.
I'd like to thank veteran Richard Wyman for putting together all of this information on possible places to test in the Panama Canal Zone. I'd like you to all come over to the Military Veterans Advocacy and join with us today. We are further than we have ever been before. We have a rulemaking request that's been granted by the VA Secretary. We have an HR 5026 bill for Panama introduced into the Congress, and we could not have done that without the Military Veterans Advocacy and the leadership of Commander John Wells. There's also a ton of information under the Veterans of Panama Canal that we have submitted to the VA Secretary who granted our requests. So this information might be able to help you in your claims. And if you need help with an attorney, if you're at the appeals level, use our contact button and contact our administrative staff and they can guide you for help.